My name is Alexis Monroe. I am 29, and on New Year's Day, I learned exactly where I stand in my own family. I walked into my parents' living room that morning carrying a bag of specialty coffee from Seattle and a box of pastries I had picked up on the way. The house smelled like cinnamon and roast beans. Wrapping paper was everywhere, and everyone was laughing. My mom was holding up a new kitchen gadget. My dad was talking about some fancy grill. My sister was already taking pictures of her new spa set. And my little niece was tearing into a science toy. My name came up. I sat down on the edge of the couch and waited. 5 minutes, 10, 15. No one handed me anything. No one even asked if I had gotten something already. It was like I was background noise in a movie about their perfect lives. Finally, I said as casually as I could, "So, did I miss my name? Or..." My mom turned to me with this tired, annoyed look I know too well and said, "Why would we spend money on you anymore? You walked away from what matters to this family. You do your own thing now. You are basically a guest out of habit." My sister let out a little laugh and added, "At least now you finally get it. You are not really on our level these days." I did not cry. I did not scream. I stood up, set the coffee on the table, told them they would need it more than I would, and walked out into the cold January air. By the time the sun went down on January 1st, I was back in my apartment in Seattle, staring at the financial app one built that tracks every dollar flowing through their coffee shops. The day ended like that, and at 8:30 the next morning, January 2nd, a single box showed up on my parents' front porch and blew their perfect little world apart. If you want to know what was inside that box and how the daughter they treated like she did not exist ended up holding all the power, stay with me until the end. 5 years earlier, I was 24, broke by most people's standards, but somehow the only person in my family who knew how close we were to losing everything. Back then, Monroe Rowers, the little coffee chain my grandparents started in Portland, was bleeding out. My mom, Caroline, ran the day-to-day like she always had. My dad, Dennis, kept signing off on new equipment loans we could not afford, and everyone kept talking about how loyal the regulars were, as if good vibes could pay overdue invoices. My older sister, Brianna, was the golden child who posted latte art on Instagram and called herself the face of the brand. I was the one who moved to Seattle to write code, allegedly the child who walked away. I still remember the night I opened their books for the first time. I was sitting at my kitchen table in Seattle with a cheap takeout dinner, staring at a spreadsheet that made my stomach drop. Rent was behind on one location. Supplier payments were being juggled, and the only plan my parents had was hoping next month would be better. I had just signed a decent contract as a software engineer for a fintech startup. It was the first time in my life I had real money in my account. And instead of celebrating, I drove 3 hours down I-5 to have an uncomfortable conversation with my parents about numbers they did not want to see. That was the night I became the majority owner of Monroe Rowers. We sat around the dining table, the same one my grandparents had bought decades ago, and I laid it out as calmly as I could. I would put up my savings to pay off the worst of the debt. In exchange, they would transfer me most of the shares. I would build a new point-of-sale system, wire every register in every shop into a single cloud dashboard, and track every dollar that came in and out. No more handwritten notes taped to the espresso machine. No more mystery cash that never reached the bank. My mom hated the idea of me being the one holding the numbers, but she hated the idea of foreclosure more. My dad signed because he thought it was temporary. Brianna signed because Mom told her to. I drove back to Seattle the next morning and started coding. For months, I split my life in half. By day, I worked on payment tools and risk models for my employer. At night, I built the Monroe Dashboard, a system that pulled live data from the registers in every shop, logged every transaction, and matched it against inventory and bank deposits. When it finally went live, I stood in the back of the flagship cafe with a laptop while my mom rang up a line of regulars. Each swipe of a card or a tap of a phone popped up on my screen in real time. Tiny proof that the bleeding could stop. We stabilized. Bills got paid. The scary letters slowed down. My parents kept the house in the suburbs. On paper, I saved the family business. In reality, I just postponed the inevitable and gave them a tool sharp enough to cut both ways. The strange thing was nothing about how they treated me really changed. At a Snort's family barbecue to celebrate turning things around, my mom wrapped an arm around Brianna in front of a group of customers and said, "She is the heart of Monroe Roasters. We would be nothing without her." Then she nodded toward me, standing off to the side with my laptop, and added, "And Alexis does the computer stuff, whatever that is." People laughed politely. I smiled because I was used to it. I had been the kid in the back since I was 10, the one tinkering while my sister charmed the room. But now I was the kid in the back who owned most of the room and had a live feed of every sale running through it. For a while, I told myself that was enough, that saving them once meant I had done my part. Then, on the night of January 1st, 2026, sitting alone in my Seattle apartment after walking out of that gift exchange, I opened the same dashboard I had built to rescue them and saw a pattern that did not make sense. The gross sales at each location were high. The bank deposits were strangely low, and the cash column looked like someone had been carving little pieces out of it for a long time. I scrolled back month after month, watching the gap widen, and realized my family had not just disrespected me. They had been using the system I created to quietly hide money, trusting that the girl who just did computer stuff would never say a word. At 8:30 on the morning of January 2nd, a plain brown box landed on my parents' front porch in Portland while I sat 200 miles away in my Seattle apartment, watching a progress bar crawl across my laptop screen. The night before, after I saw the cash gaps in the dashboard, I stayed up exporting everything I needed from the system I had built. Every cash sale, every card swipe, every deposit, every missing dollar, neatly organized into a file that told the truth more clearly than I ever could. I loaded that file and a lightweight offline version of my app onto a USB drive, printed out a few pages of summary reports, and tucked it all into that box along with a single sticky note that said, "Plug this in." No signature, no explanation, just numbers. The same day, courier picked it up from the front desk of my building and drove south, while I tried to decide whether I was being petty or finally honest. In their kitchen, my mom was probably topping off her mug, my dad scrolling through news on his phone, my sister checking comments on her holiday posts. When the doorbell rang, my niece Suddy ran to the window and shouted something about a package. My sister opened the door, looked around the empty porch, and carried the box inside like it was just another late gift. She tore off the tape, flipped the lid open, and froze. Inside was the USB, the printed reports with the Monroe Roasters logo at the top, and page after page of columns showing sales, deposits, and a growing column labeled underreported. I was not there to see it, but I know my sister well enough to picture her calling for our mom, her voice climbing a little higher with each word. My mom would have wiped her hands on a dish towel, annoyed at the interruption until she saw my name in one of the tiny footers at the bottom of the report generated by Monroe Analytics, a Lex Monroe tool. That was the part one did on purpose. My dad would have taken the papers, flipped through them, and gone pale when he realized the dates went back years, long before that New Year's Day, where they decided I was not worth a $20 gift card. Somewhere, amid the confusion, they would have seen the line that showed exactly how much money should have hit the bank and how much actually did. The difference was not a rounding error. It was a pattern. At Snort's some point, my mom must have grabbed her phone and tried to call me because a notification popped up on my screen for half a second before it disappeared. Blocked. A second later, another call came through from my dad. Also blocked. Then a text from my sister. "Are you serious right now?" Followed by 3 dots. Then nothing because my phone filters messages from numbers I have muted into a quiet little folder. I never check. While they crowded around the kitchen table with those pages and that USB, arguing about what could be proven and what could still be hidden, I opened the same reports on my laptop and scrolled slowly. I watched the numbers like I was watching an old wound finally being stitched closed. For years, they had taken me for granted, told anyone who would listen, that I was just the kid who played with computers while they did the real work. Now, every corner they had cut and every dollar they had skimmed was laid out in a format designed to be understood by bankers, auditors, and tax agents. I still had not decided exactly who I was going to show it to when I hit save and closed my laptop. But I knew one thing with absolute clarity. For the first time in my life, my family needed something from me more than I needed anything from them. My sister showed up at my apartment in Seattle the next afternoon like nothing was wrong. Like we were two normal siblings grabbing coffee after the holidays. I watched her through the peephole for a second, standing in the hallway in her expensive coat, phone in one hand, reusable cup in the other, looking more like an influencer on a brand deal than someone whose entire business had just been dissected on paper. When I opened the door, she smiled too wide and said, "Lex, can we talk?" And my first instinct was to shut it again. Instead, snorts. I stepped aside and let her walk in. She made a slow loop around my living room, pointing out the view, the framed hackathon badge, the second monitor on my desk, as if seeing evidence that my life was real for the first time. Then she put her cup down and dropped the act. "Mom is freaking out," she said. "Dad too." Her voice had that tight edge she gets when she is scared but trying not to show it. "They found your name on the reports. They know it came from you." I leaned against the counter and waited. She kept talking fast now. "We thought you just helped with the loans. Okay. We did not know you actually owned most of the company and had some back door into everything. That is not how any of this works." I said, "You all sat at the table and signed the papers. You knew exactly what I was offering and what I was asking for." She waved that away like it was a detail that did not matter. "They are saying this is going to cause a huge mess with taxes, that you blew it up over nothing over a rough holiday." Alexis, my chest tightened at that. Nothing. A rough holiday. I saw again my mom looking straight through me on New Year's Day while everyone around me opened gifts, and I felt something settle into place. Brianna must have seen it on my face because she switched strategies. "Look," she said, dropping her voice. "You know how things are run. Cash is just easier sometimes. People have done it like this forever. And Sadie loves her school. She loves her friends. If this gets any worse, we could lose the house, the shops, everything. Do you really want to be the reason she has to pack up her room and say goodbye to her whole life?" I almost laughed because it was so textbook. When we were kids, Mom used to pull that same move, wrapping every argument in guilt and family and tradition until you could not tell where your feelings ended and hers began. I thought about Sadie with her messy ponytail and science kit, about how she had nothing to do with any of this. And for a second, I felt my resolve wobble. Then I remembered the numbers on my screen. Years of underreported cash, years of them signing my name as an officer on tax forms while quietly skimming from the business I had saved. "You are not putting this on a 9-year-old, I said quietly. "You and Mom and Dad made these choices, not her." She shook her head like I was being unreasonable. "You changed, Alexis. You left. You chose tech and strangers over your own family. And now you are punishing us for not throwing you a party every time you come home." There it was, the old script. I walked away from the only thing that mattered. I was ungrateful. I owed them loyalty forever because I shared their last name. I thought about a winter morning when I was 15, standing in the back of the original Monroe rowers with a beat-up laptop balanced on a milk crate. I had stayed up all night teaching myself how to build a basic ordering page, proud of the little form that could send drink choices straight to the bar. When I showed it to my mom, she laughed gently and told me to put it away so I would not scare off the regulars. "People come here to talk to us, not to a screen," she said loud enough for the whole line to hear. Then called Brianna out front and had her practice steaming milk and chatting with customers while I pretended I was busy with homework in the back. I did not know it then, but that day set the tone for the next decade. She was the face. I was the background, and now the background had receipts.